Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lexi, and I am the program coordinator at Little Free Library, and you're joining me again for another episode of Little Free Library Unbound. Thank you so much for being here. My colleague Shelby is going to share some tips in the chat for your best viewing experience, so you can see half the screen of our slides and half of our presenters, or however works best for you. If you have any questions, Shelby will be keeping an eye on the chat, and you can send her any questions that come up or any technical issues, and she will do her best to answer those in a timely manner. Our regular moderator, Anita, is on the road this week and will be unable to join us, but I am excited to introduce you to another fabulous Little Free Library National Board member, Margaret Bernstein. Margaret has been a board member since 2015. She's based in Cleveland, where she is the community relations director for the local NBC TV station. She is passionate about family literacy and doing all she can to foster more at-home reading for children, and she believes that Little Free Libraries fit perfectly into her mission. She's written 3 storybooks designed for fathers of color to read with their children: All in a Dad's Day, Donuts with Dad, and The Father's Walk, and you can see some great pictures with those books. And as an author herself and a champion of over 100 Little Free Libraries in Cleveland, Margaret is the perfect moderator for this month. So we're really excited to welcome her. Hey, Margaret.
Hey, Lexi, thank you so much. Anita, we miss you, but we will soldier on without you. And I'm happy for this opportunity to meet 3 fabulous authors. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 8 of Little Free Library Unbound. As Lexi mentioned, I'm Margaret Bernstein, and I am a national board member for Little Free Library. Today, we will be joined by 3 great authors who have Little Free Libraries of their own. And in addition to the to the authors I'll introduce here in just a bit, would you believe there are more authors who have Little Free Libraries of their own, which is really cool to see. Here is just a small list of some of the authors we know about and love who have Little Free Libraries. And there are a couple photos of them. If one of them is in your area, you can visit them. You can find them on our littlefreelibrary.org map and make a visit. And let us know in the chat if you know of any other authors who aren't listed who have a Little Free Library. We also want to give a special shout out to Armand Rosamilia, a steward in Jacksonville, Florida. This past Sunday, August 8th, Armand hosted Little Free Library Author Day, which was an event to encourage authors who are stewards to share signed copies of their books in nearby Little Free Libraries. Armand is a regular contributor to our steward group on Facebook, and this looked like a really great event. So just keep sharing those great ideas on our robust Facebook page. It's a great place where we are hearing so many fabulous concepts of fun things to do with your Little Free Library. And now, without further ado, let's welcome our author stewards to the Zoom stage today. First, we'd like to welcome award-winning author and illustrator Grace Lin. Grace writes and illustrates board books, picture books, and middle grade books. She also has a Little Free Library that is located in Northampton, Massachusetts. Grace, thank you for being here. Let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming, and I'm so honored to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm children's book author and illustrator Grace Lin. That means I write the words in my books, and I also do the pictures. And I'm the author and illustrator of all different kinds of books, just like you can see in the slide. I'm an author and illustrator of board books, so books for babies. I'm an author and illustrator of early readers, books for kids who are just starting to learn how to read. I'm an author and illustrator of novels, so for independent readers. And I'm also an author and illustrator of picture books, books that are really meant for sharing. So those are kinds of the books that I like to share in my Little Free Library, though I also do get many adult books in there as well.
So Grace, we see just a great array of books behind you, and we know that you're very prolific. Are you working on any new books at the moment?
Yes, I am. Unfortunately, the pandemic kind of slowed me down a little bit. So I have a picture book that I have been illustrating that missed its deadline, but it's called Once Upon a Book. It was supposed to come out, I think, in fall 2022, but now it looks like it's not going to come out until winter 2023. And then I have a novel that I'm working on, which is about, if any of you ever go to a Chinatown, you'll see that there's always a Chinese gate. And in front of the Chinese gate, there's two Chinese lions. And one lion will hold a ball and the other lion will hold a Chinese cub. And my novel is about those Chinese lions. And hopefully the book will come out in fall 2023, but who knows?
Right, right. Well, we will be waiting for it when it does happen. And we are so glad to have you here today, Grace. And I know all our other authors can relate to missed deadlines. I would not be surprised. So let's bring on Claire Fuller. She is our next author. And she is our very first international steward and author on Unbound. So Claire is a novelist living and working in Winchester, England. And that is where her little free library is located. So Claire, your most recent novel, Unsettled Ground, came out in June. Congratulations. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'll do what Grace did, hold up a copy. Yeah, Unsettled Ground, yeah, came out May, June in the US. It's been shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, which I'm very, very excited about.
We all are.
Yeah, the announcement was meant to happen in July, and that's because of the pandemic has now got delayed till September. So it's still 3 weeks to go before I find out, but that's very exciting. But Unsettled Ground, it's about, well, they're adult books I write, they're often quite dark. And Unsettled Ground is about some twins called Jeannie and Julius who live with their mother in rural isolation and poverty, even though they're age 51, they've always lived with her. And at the beginning of the book, she dies and their world changes really, and they have to kind of negotiate technology and paperwork and their neighbors and money and all sorts of things that they haven't been able to cope with before. So that's my fourth novel, and there are, as you can see, I guess on the slide, 3 others before that.
Well, we're really hoping that you vault to the top of that short list. And let us know, Claire, are you working on anything new?
I am. I started something before the pandemic, a novel, and it turns out that was a pandemic novel, and then 3 months later the actual pandemic started, so that was a bit of a shocker, but I've carried on writing it and we'll see what happens. I'm still quite a long way off finishing it, so I don't know where it's going to go yet.
Got it. Okay. And now we want to welcome our third guest, Karina Yan Glaser, who you may know for her awesome Vanderbeeker series. This is a series about a fictional multiracial family living in a Harlem brownstone. And that is where you will find her real little free library located. It's in Harlem. So Karina, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you give us a little sneak peek of what's to expect in your new book, your 5th installment, which comes out on September 21st?
Yeah, sure. Well, I am the author of a book series that begins with this one. I'm sorry. This is every Zoom I ever do. There's a cat on my desk. Okay, so this is the very first one. This book was really born out of living in my neighborhood, raising my kids here, and really wanting to capture sort of the joy and just the culture of Harlem. And yeah, so I love living here. The 5th book is coming out in September, like Margaret said, and that I like writing a lot about families, and both families that are linked by genetics as well as family that are found families. And in the book series, it talks a lot about found families, and in the 5th book, it talks about one of the parents' families, and sort of finding things out about family that are a little different from what you thought, and trying to discover more when you don't have a lot of information. So that's the fifth book.
I just have to follow up with, what is a found family?
Well, so I grew up with a very small family. My parents were immigrants from China, and when they moved here and I was born, I think that because they didn't have, like most of their family stayed in China, so I think they felt maybe nervous or apprehensive about going out into the neighborhood and meeting other people. And so their circles were very, very small. And I felt when I grew up that I really wanted a home where people were in and out and neighbors were visiting. And when I walked out the door, I wanted a place where my kids knew a lot of people on their block and could just feel like their world was larger than just our small little apartment. So I talk a lot about families that we choose as well as families that we were born with.
The families that we choose. Got it. Okay, well, we are going to launch into our Q&A. And as we do, I just want to remind everybody participating today how glad we are to have you and to have the best viewing experience today. Just be sure to select the side-by-side gallery view in that top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen. And now we're just going to invite our three guests to free forum the answers to these questions. And the very first burning question that we have is, when did you start your little free library? Grace, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I started my little free library during the pandemic, actually. The pandemic was a blessing and a curse in some ways. Blessing because it forced me to stay home a lot because I used to travel quite a bit. I had to, this sounds terrible when I said I had to stay with my child a lot. That's not exactly what I meant. But because there was no summer camps, there was no in-person school, we kind of started our own little camp, the two of us, and we potted with another family. And every day we did crafts. And one of the things that I did is get a free library and paint it up. It was actually a birthday present for myself. So I was like, I'll buy myself a little free library. And then part of the summer craft camp was me painting it.
Okay, love to hear that. All right, Claire, how about you?
Well, I know the exact date that it went outside the house, which was the 4th of August, 2019. So kind of 3 years, is that about 3 years?
Yeah,
3 years.
On the anniversary.
Yeah. I got my husband to make it, really, following, I think, some of the little free library designs that you have available. And he's quite handy. He is actually a university librarian, and I'm a bit jealous of his job. So I thought, well, I quite like my own little library, and he got his hammer out and his tools out, and he made a little box with a lovely little roof. We don't have any lawn or verge outside my house. There's just a row of railings. So it's on a post which is attached to the railings. But yeah, I should really have had an anniversary party, shouldn't I? But I've missed it. Have to be next year.
That's right, and that's right. You can invite the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
Karina, how about you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love the idea of like a birthday party for the little free library. I think that's really cute. So I started mine in 2015. I live in a co-op building, so we have about 80 different apartments in our building. And when I thought about having the little free library, I knew I would need co-op approval, because the idea was to put it in a planter that's right in front of our building, which gets a lot of traffic. There are many schools right around our building. And so I got myself on the board of the co-op, and my first order of business was me saying, what about a little free library? And we had to do a whole vote. I had to pitch it. I had to tell them how much it was going to cost and if we needed a permit. And yeah, and I think I sold it pretty well because everyone voted yes except for one person, which I still hold a grudge against him a little bit 8 years later. But so that's how we started it. And I had a local carpenter in Harlem build it. And then we we actually, one of our neighbors in the building, her dad rebuilt it because it was sort of falling apart and we didn't really know how to take care of it. So he ended up rebuilding it, and we have a nice sturdy one now that we know how to better take care of it and keep it weatherproof. And so it's been a long time we've had it now. It's been great.
You have absolutely learned a lot of those Little Free Library steward lessons that
Yes.
come with the long haul. And but absolutely, you've got to keep it up. And sometimes you might need to replace it if it wasn't built well at the beginning. Karina, why don't you also answer our next question? What did having books or not having books mean to you as a child?
Well, I mean, I think like most authors, books were a huge part of my life growing up. And for me, like my access to books came solely through libraries, public libraries. And when I got to a school that had a library, I moved around a lot when I was growing up. I moved schools almost every single year. And I mean, the school library was sort of a refuge for me, like changing schools so often, never knowing anyone. It just felt like going home. Like, even though I didn't know anybody, I could go to the library and I would know the books that were in the library. They would be familiar friends wherever I went. And I think it did inform a lot of why I wanted to start one in my community, because we do have a local library near us, but we don't have any bookstores. And a lot of the schools in our neighborhood don't have libraries on site in the school. And I knew that books were so important to me growing up, and I wanted, the thousands of kids who live in Harlem to also have a place where they could take books and not feel like they have to return it either, that they could keep them and, even like build their own library at home from the books that they get from our Little Free Library. So it's been great, and it definitely, growing up, having access to books definitely informed why I wanted to start one here.
I have a huge number of books, and my mother's German and was still really learning English when she had me and my sister, so she didn't read to us, and my dad didn't really either. So it was libraries for me that really kind of turned me onto books and onto reading. And when I was 10, I moved house, but there wasn't kind of public transport from my school to my house, so my neighbours had taken me home, but the timings didn't work. So I had to spend about 3/4 of an hour every day in the local public library, which is where we decided that they would pick me up from. And so what else was I going to do but kind of discover books? And then every time I moved, it was the local library that I went and found where that was, and I would just take out as many books as were allowed. At the time, I think it was normally about 6 books, and I would choose them only by their cover. And if I didn't, I'd give them a page, even at kind of age 12 or whatever, I'd give them a page, and if I didn't like it, no, it would go back, and I read and I read and I read so much. So it's always been about libraries for me. And now I'm just kind of lucky enough to be able to buy books and keep books. So I want to be able to share that experience. So Grace, it's looking like we already have a forum of childhood library lovers, because I was one too. How about you?
Yeah, I think very similar to Karina's story about how she found friends in books. Unlike both Claire and Karina, though, I did not move around that much as a child. I actually grew up in upstate New York, and I have to say upstate New York because sometimes people get mixed up when I say New York, they think it's like New York City, but upstate New books that I create. I mean, it's so obvious, right? Like I'm creating the books that I wished I had seen when I was a child. I'm creating all the books that I wished I had had. And I think that's what really pushes me to have a little free library. I feel like the access to the books I never had, I'm hoping that I can give people around me a taste of it as well.
Okay, and then Claire, let's mix it up, and I'll start with you on this next question. What prompted you to start a little free library of your own?
Well, back in, I guess it was July 2019, I went on a trip to the US with my librarian husband, and I just saw all these little free, well, I basically were driving around, didn't even know what they were, just these kind of boxes by the side of the road. Stop, what's that? You know, and then going and discovering what that was and seeing the sign on them and then looking that up on the internet and just thinking, I want one of those. I want one of those at home. And so I got Tim to make me one when we got back. And it was partly because I wanted one, but also as an author, I get sent lots and lots of books to read, to quote for, and I cannot keep all of them. I try to keep the ones I love, but our house is full of books. So my library does get stocked with a lot of books that I get sent, and so it's a good way of them finding a new home too, because I cannot throw a book away. You know, my alternative would be take it to my charity shop or Goodwill, but it's so lovely to have it out there.
Absolutely, and I can't help but notice all three of our authors have these great backdrops of bookshelves behind them. So, Karina, what about you? What prompted you to start your little free library?
Sure, but let me just show you, just swivel my camera so you can see. For my birthday a couple of years ago, my husband put up all these bookshelves above our bed, and that's like all the middle grade books that I have.
Can I just say, these are some great husbands you guys have found. Excellent.
They really know like our love language, I feel.
Nicely done. Okay.
Well, what started me thinking about Little Free Library was actually I was working for, I still work for a company called Book Riot, where I do a lot of sort of spotlighting of children's books, and I have a weekly newsletter that goes out through Book Riot. And because I was on a lot of radars of publicists, I saw something come across my desk, Chronicle books, where they partner with Little Free Library on a design challenge. And the person who won had built this gorgeous little free library that had a garden on top. And I was just really getting into gardening around that time, and like I started a gardening project in our building, and got all these permission from the board to put all these planters back there, and people from our building could have these plots to garden every summer. And I thought, well, this looks like an amazing idea to have like a book area with a garden, and it sort of combines two things that I'm really passionate about. And so I applied for one of the, because I think they had like 2 finished little free libraries that they were raffling off, and you had to like write down like a little essay why you thought this would be great in your community. So I wrote this whole long essay and sent it in, and we didn't win it, but they posted sort of the design specs of what they did at Chronicle with the garden on top. And so that's when I was like, okay, so I didn't win the library, but maybe I can convince the board to pay for it and have someone build it. So then we had the specs because they generously donated for architectural design, and that's how we started.
And Grace, how'd you get started?
Oh, so interesting. So I started it because I was the head of the diversity committee of my child's preschool. And I remember walking into that first meeting and looking around and realizing that like I was the only person of color in the whole diversity committee. And I'm like, I think we have a little bit of a problem. And so my idea was like, I think we need to bring diverse books into lives, even though they're so young. And so my idea in the beginning was let's get, well, in the foyer of the preschool, we will have diverse books, diverse board books, diverse kids books, and these books will be books that the parents can come and go and look and take as they please, and we had this whole project set up. And someone said, oh, it's just like a little free library. And I said, what's that? And then I went and looked it up, and I was like, I want one of those. And so that is how I became an advocate for my own personal library.
Absolutely. And Grace, I see you just brought up something that I know prompted Shelby King at Little Free Library to add into the chat. More information on our Read in Color initiative, absolutely prompted by the idea that you shared when you said you're creating all the books you wish you had as a child for a child growing up of color to not see people that look like you in the books that you're just inhaling. It really does sort of create a sense that you're not important, you're not narrating this type of
It's a really
protagonist,
Yeah. It's a really big deal. I mean, the reason why I'm obviously talking, I actually did a TEDx talk about this, the windows and mirrors of your child's bookshelf. So that's why I talk about this quite a bit. But when you bring diverse books into your child's life, you set them up for paths of self-worth and empathy, which are just really important to make good humans. So
that's right. And of course, that's the beauty of reading, is building empathy for all types of people we only were able to pry into their lives once we read these books. All right, we'll do like a quick round on this one. Do you ever include any audiobooks in your Little Free libraries, or just books in print? Does anybody use audiobooks?
I listen to audiobooks myself, but they tend to be online, so I can't kind of put those in. But I have had people leave them before, and I think, you know, obviously in a diverse way for the deaf community as well. Sorry, that's not going to work. For other kind of communities, I think it's blind. Sorry, that's going to be a very useful book to have in your library.
Yeah, we have some drop off audiobooks, and I put them in there. But I don't get many audiobooks, like physical copies myself. Like Claire, I listen mostly through Libro FM or the digital platform. But people do leave them in the library, and they go pretty quickly.
I love audiobooks. That's the same thing. Usually online. The few that I do put in are usually like the overstuff that I get of my own. Because I got 20 of these. We'll put one there.
And nothing wrong with it. Okay. Let's talk about what you all just like to read when you're not writing. Grace, what do you like to read? Okay. As Grace is frozen, we'll unmute her. And Karina, why don't you do it?
Sure. I like to read a lot of different things. I mostly read because I work for Riot, and I do a lot of things with it, so I do a lot of that. But I also read a lot of notebooks and graphic novels, nonfiction. I will read anything that anyone
I guess when I first started reading adult books, I was reading quite dark fiction, or you know, books with kind of mysteries in them, or books that are quite sad. I don't particularly read uplifting books, and so those are the kind of books I still like to read, I think. Something, perhaps literary fiction, I suppose, commercial literary fiction. Where that crossover comes, I'm not quite sure. But I will still read anything that comes my way. So I feel like as a steward, I am allowed to have first pick of what comes in the library. So, you know, if it's something that I take a fancy to, I will take it out and put it on my to read shelf. And when I've read it, it goes back in. But I feel like that's one of the perks.
Absolutely. You guys are grasping it. You get first dibs. All right. Now, often we will add
I don't do any more with it than that, but it is kind of, it shows me how, you know, what's coming in and what's going out. And often the people who use it regularly will put lots of books in there at once. They're obviously clearing out their shelves or something. So they'll kind of cram in 10 books because that's what they've got when they walk past. So I will take those out and keep them until the library gets a little bit sparse, and then I put them back in. So I'm kind of I'm checking it every day. I'm not always adding books. Sometimes I'm actually taking books out. But it depends how many are in there. I want it to look nice. You know, I don't want it to look crammed in or too empty.
So we're so happy to have you back, Grace, and we are answering this question: how often do you add books to the library? I'll go to Karina next.
Okay. Well, so when we first built the library and we were going to put it out, my daughters and I, like the 2 weeks leading up to putting up the library, we like went through our bookshelves and like selected books we wanted to put in there, and we were like so excited. We had this like pile, and we got the library up, we put the books in there, and then we were like, oh, let's see if like anyone like takes any books, and we walked the dog around the block, and we came back, and the whole thing was empty. Like people were so excited, like it was a course of 10 minutes, and they were all gone, and we had spent like 2 weeks like carefully selecting all the books and like stamping them with a little free library stamp, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is a bigger we need to think about like what we're gonna do, because we don't have enough books to like continue putting like 30 books in there every day. So I ended up talking to so many people in the next month, like the local library, like Goodwill, the used bookstore, like multiple used bookstores, and it was like, listen, if you have overstock, if you're just like got books like that you don't need, and you're just trying to like clear out your storage space, like can you tell us, because we will drive there and pick them up, and that's how we kept the library stocked, because it really took many years before we were just getting steady inventory used, so it was like totally up to us to stock it. And so we would drive once a month to a local bookstore and pick up their overstock, and then my daughters and I would stamp all the books and like put them in, and we did this for multiple years, and now we don't need to do that. The library is more self-sustaining, and now that I get a lot of books from my work at Book Riot, so I can add those in to fill it out. We also have a bookshelf down in the basement in our community storage room where I store extra books that we can add if things are getting sparse. But yeah, it definitely was a learning curve in the beginning. I was totally panicked in the beginning, like, oh my gosh, I don't think like we can keep books in here, like they're just flying off the shelves, like. But now it's really great.
So I want to just ask, I didn't even know that there was a little library stamp. I'm quite curious about that.
Oh, yes, there is. So yeah, so I can't inventory because our neighborhood is so highly trafficked, and we're getting so many books all the time. So I love the idea of doing that. But what we did was just stamp it. But then I was spending my whole life like stamping these books. Like I couldn't do it anymore after a couple of years. I don't do that anymore. But there is a little free library stamp that I bought on Etsy that I use for the books. And yeah, but that was a while ago.
So I just put the link to the stamp. She's on time all the time. In the chat. I do think it usually says always a gift, never for sale.
Yeah.
And so to keep people from, just, going through your library and, just stuffing everything into a box and taking it to the book resale shop. So
yeah, that's what I'm always worried about. So the stamp will be useful, but I've written a little label which I stick in the front of my books that says, you can keep this, but please don't sell it, and you can return it if you want, or return something else. And if you love it, the author would also love it if you wrote a review. So
oh, that's nice.
yeah.
that is. So you two have put so much work in. Grace, I'm glad that you are back. Our participants are marveling with me at just all the work that Claire and Karina have put into their libraries. Karina just having to create relationships in order to keep it stocked because the books were flying out of it, and Claire with this register that she manages every day.
So impressive.
Of the books that are there. So tell us how often you add books to your library.
So I'm so sorry. I don't know if you could tell, but we're having a huge storm, like thunder, lightning. All the power went off. So I'm actually joining using cell service. So hopefully this stays. So that's why I'm all like weird and everything. But how often do I
add books in your library?
Usually, in the beginning, I was really, really good at it. But just like Karina, it was just so hard to keep up because, especially, I realized with because of kids' books, I tried to stock it with a lot of children's books, and those just went so fast. And then I noticed people started putting like adult books in, and those went a lot slower. Some people, and I had to start weeding books out because people started putting like business books in that were like from 1992, and I'd be like, oh. And so usually nowadays, I always put like one or two books in like every other day, but I usually just keep an eye on it though. To like every couple of weeks, I'll have to go and put like a big stack in, but depending on how many children's books were there or not. So usually, strangely enough, the adult books stay pretty constant in my library. I think that's more my clientele. You all sound kind of hands-on to me, but tell us, are you a hands-on or hands-off type of steward? So we've got some stewards that throw parties at the library, that decorate them, that are switching it out every day. Tell us what is your philosophy? Do you go out and meet the people as they use it? What's your philosophy for interacting with the library? I'll answer just in case I get kicked off again. But I don't really like to interact with the people who come and take the books. I kind of feel like it's a very private thing, you know. I do kind of spy once in a while. I remember once during the winter, a guy who was like plowing the street, and we had them plow our driveway. And as he was passing by, he had stopped. He looked at the library, and he was like, "Oh man!" And he like ran to it, and he grabbed the book out, and then he was like talking to this like this big burly guy grabbing one of the children's books. He's like, "I read this when I was a kid. It was the best book." So cool. And so those are the things I kind of like to spy on, but I don't like to say, "This is my little free library. Take a book." You know, I kind of feel like it's something that that space and that experience, I want it to belong to them.
Okay, Claire, how about you?
Very much the same. I'm either too shy or I don't. I feel like it is a personal experience to look at the library. And those times when I happen to have come out my front door and someone is standing at the library, sometimes we have a chat, but they never take anything. I think they're too shy, or there's some funny interaction going on. But my husband works downstairs in a room that overlooks the library, but they can't see in because he's quite a long way from the window, and I'm kind of above it. So if he happens to look out and see someone, he'll go, "Library, library, library," up the stairs, and then I can look down through my window, and they never look up, but I can kind of watch them choose their books, which I just love doing. But I haven't really had parties, and I don't decorate it. But it's great fun.
Got it. Okay, Karina?
So I pretty much, I have two dogs, so I'm constantly outside walking them, and whenever I pass by in the morning, I'll just like clean it because, there's so much traffic that a lot of times, the books are all scattered in there, or sometimes they're like trash in it, so I have to like clean it every day and sort of clean the book and add books if and I do put like a little Christmassy, or sort of holiday-ish, holiday decoration on it on the post. I just get it from like the local flower shop bodega and just like stick it on there with a ribbon. But in terms of talking to people, I mean, if someone's just browsing, I definitely don't interrupt them. But a lot of times when I'm neatening it or adding books, someone will be like, hey, I really like this. And I'm like, yeah, like, please take as many books as you want because we have so many, and don't return them because we get so many books. And they're like, oh, well, I'm looking for books for my kids. And since I am so familiar with kids' books over the years of working at Book Riot and writing, I'll be like, oh, what did they like last? What are some of their favorite books? Like, are you looking for nonfiction or fiction? And then, like, I'll just be like, how about this one? How about this one? And that's really fun. Like, it sort of, like, captures my, like, dreams of being a librarian and, like, just, like, handing stacks of books to someone. And so I do that. If someone, like, asks me first, then I'll definitely, like, be like, you might like this one just came in, you might like that. But if someone is just browsing, just browse it. Just like Grace and Claire.
Now, what's been the biggest surprise of your Little Free Library stewardship career? Grace, we still have you, so go ahead.
Well, I actually don't live on a very popular street. I live kind of off. There's no across the street is just like a big forest, and I'm actually when I put the Little Free Library out, I was like, oh, maybe just like the neighbor kid, like all two of them will like that'll be nice. But I was surprised, like people drive to come to the library, like they come to the little, and I was really surprised how often it's been used, even though I feel like I'm a little bit off the beaten path.
Okay, Karina.
So our library's been up there for about 7 years, and on the 4th of July, we had a little incident with some rowdiness on the 4th of July, and the thing fell over, and so we had to do some repairs because the door was broken and the post was broken, and so our superintendent of our building, he was so kind and like brought it back to his house and repaired it, and it took about like 2 weeks for him to do that. And I thought I was really going to be the only one who noticed that it was gone. And like when I saw like the blank spot and like that planter, it just was like, oh my gosh, I really miss it. And I was sort of feeling like maybe I'm the only one who misses it. But I got so many comments from neighbors and people like just walking on the street like, hey, like, are you going to put that back up? Is it permanently gone? Or is it like, what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, we're repairing it right now. It's going to come back. And so that's definitely surprised me that so many people loved it. And when we got it back up, we like put 2 posts on it this time, so like really sturdy. And when it came back up, my neighbor said he saw a kid notice that it was back up and ran to it and was like, the book barrier's back, the book barrier's back. And it just made me so happy that people are like excited about it, and you know, and yeah, then it makes me think about that one board member who didn't focus on it. Like, ha, see, everyone loves it. No one hates it. Everyone loves it.
They depend upon it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Claire.
I think it's the biggest surprise. Maybe it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was that how much it was used and valued during the pandemic. And I had notes through the door from quite a few neighbours saying how much it meant to them because our public libraries were all shut during lockdown. And, you know, people wrote notes to say this kind of just completely kept me going because, you know, maybe they lived alone, they weren't able to see anyone else, they were trying to self-isolate, but they could walk down to the library, choose a book and take it home, and if they didn't like it, they could come the next day and get another. And those notes were really quite moving, and it feels like it's a really worthwhile thing. It's not just fun for me, it has actually been really valuable, I think, for my neighbours.
Claire, you're definitely talking about something we discussed in our Little Free Library board meetings, which was during the pandemic when we couldn't do anything. People would put things of necessity. Didn't know who was in need, but knew that people were, and they would place them in Little Free Libraries. We just saw kind of the meaning of Little Free Library get stretched during the pandemic as people just our last question. I'm pretty impressed. We're on pretty much on track. If you could keep one book stocked in your little free library at all times, just need a quick shout out. What would it be? Grace, what would be yours?
I try to stock all my own books, obviously, but the one that I tend to throw in whenever I can is this one right here. We Should Be Feminists. It's like a little small book, and it's really for adults. But I feel like it's almost an all ages book. I love it, and it's like a very nice book to have. You know, it feels very accessible and everything. So this is the book I'd like to share.
We should all be feminists. Okay, Claire.
I guess really that question for me is, what's my favorite book? And what book can I press into the hands of everyone else? And I think certainly at the moment, because it does change, but We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley. It's just one of my favorite books, and I reread it and I find new things in it. It's dark and gothic and wonderful, and I think everybody should read it.
That's why I always try to put Grace's books in my little free library, because I just love everything she writes, and she writes for all ages, and they're always so popular. They go right away. And then the other book that I really love putting in are these two books, which are Nikki Grimes' books. She writes poetry that honors poets of Harlem, and this one is focused on women poets, and this one is a lot of like the Harlem Renaissance poets. And I just love that that there is such a rich history in Harlem of poetry and literature, and I definitely want families and people here in Harlem to be able to read poetry that is inspired by their neighborhood, and by people that live in the neighborhood and love the neighborhood.
So this has been a fabulous discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to Lexi so she can sum up just some of the many comments that have been being placed into the chat. I just love that they've just been rolling in throughout the whole hour. Lexi?
Thank you, everyone. This has been so great. I am really appreciative from hearing from all of you. There are so many similarities and differences to the Little Free Library experience. I feel like I say this every month when we meet, but it really is so unique. And everyone's is a little different, but there are those similarities, those challenges that everyone faces. So it's really great to hear from each of you and about what you're working on, and just the fresh ideas are a lot of fun. So thank you so much for being here. I don't believe, it's looking like we're a little tight on time, so we do not have time for questions from the chat, but I will include any links and relevant parts of our conversation in our show notes, which are always shared with the replay of our Unbound session. So thank you again, Grace and Karina and Claire. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, well, the dedication of our Little Free Library stewards, who are also authors, is just so impressive. I'm so thankful to have heard from them and just heard the love with which they steward their libraries. Thank you to those wonderful guests that we had today. And I do want to say, if you've enjoyed this chapter of Little Free Library Unbound, please consider a financial contribution to help us continue to offer these free events. Donations to our nonprofit also support our steward services activities, so we can create more resources and opportunities for our stewards. You can donate at littlefreelibrary.org/donate.
Thank you so much for being with us, Margaret. It was so great to have you join us.
Enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And thanks again to all our participants. Love seeing all of your thoughts and your sharing in the chat.
Talk soon, Margaret. Have a great night. We hope you'll join us next month for Chapter 9 of Little Free Library Unbound. Like we did in April, we'll be hosting another steward panel to answer questions about stewardship. And if you missed that last April session, you can find all of the previous video recordings at littlefreelibrary.org/LFL-Unbound. And Shelby will be sharing the registration link for Chapter 9, so you can join us next month to learn more about what it's like to steward a Little Free Library, if you've been thinking about it, or if you're new to it, or if you're a seasoned pro and just want to share some tips and tricks. Everybody has something to offer in that space. So we hope that one will be just as popular as it was in April, because it was a lot of fun and gave us a lot of great ideas to share. And for those of you who joined us today, you will receive an email tomorrow with a survey for you to share your feedback on this month's event. And we are excited to give away 5 copies of Claire's new book, Unsettled Ground, thanks to her publishers at Tin House. So fill out that survey and let us know what you thought, and we will choose 5 winners to get a copy of that new book. And finally, if you haven't already, we encourage you to follow Little Free Library on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest. We're on all the social media, and Shelby will share all those links. You can stay in the know about our programs, as well as Little Free Library Unbound and our different offerings and news about what's to come. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.